Imagine the absolute chaos inside that courtroom when Todd Tucker, the man who has mastered the art of tactical silence for years, finally stood up, cleared his throat, and decided that enough was enough. Can you even process the level of tension in that room? For days, we've watched Porsha Williams deliver a testimony so explosive, so emotionally charged, that it felt like the floor was literally melting away. She painted a picture of betrayal that left the entire internet gasping for air. But just when everyone thought Todd was backed into a corner with no escape, he flipped the entire script in a way that honestly felt like a scene straight out of a high-stakes legal thriller. The air didn't just get thin, it vanished. People were holding their breath, eyes glued to his every move, waiting for the moment the mask would finally slip. And then, it happened. The mention of the mystery caller. The one person no one thought would ever be brought into the light. Did Todd just expose a massive setup? Or is this the beginning of an even darker chapter for the Atlanta elite? If you thought you knew the truth about what went down between these two, you need to buckle up, because the reality is far more twisted than any headline could ever capture. To understand the sheer magnitude of the mess we are witnessing today, you have to realize that the entertainment world hasn't seen a collision this violent since the last time a multi-million-dollar contract was ripped up in public. For years, Todd Tucker and Porsha Williams have moved through the same high-stakes social circles of Atlanta. Circles where a handshake is usually a contract and a whisper can end a career. But what happened in that courtroom today wasn't just a professional disagreement. It was the final explosion of a decade-long build-up of suppressed resentment and calculated moves. We are talking about two individuals who know where all the bodies are buried because, in many cases, they were the ones holding the shovels. Todd has always been the man behind the curtain, the producer, the strategist, the one who watches everyone else's moves while keeping his own cards pressed firmly against his chest. On the other side, you have Porsha, a woman who has built an empire on her ability to command a room and project an image of ultimate resilience. When these two forces finally clashed under the cold, flickering lights of a legal setting, it wasn't just about the testimony. It was about the destruction of a narrative that both had worked incredibly hard to maintain. The room felt like a pressure cooker about to blow its lid because for the first time, the polite mask of the industry was stripped away. The scandal itself is rooted in a web of interactions that go back much further than the recent headlines suggest. Insiders who have been part of their broader professional network have been hinting for months that something was rotting beneath the surface. There were reports of late-night meetings, missed phone calls that were later deleted, and a series of business discussions that looked a lot more like personal interventions. Porsha's testimony, which had been circulating in fragments for days, was a masterclass in controlled chaos. She didn't just accuse, she dismantled. She spoke about moments of miscommunication that felt more like deliberate sabotage and pointed toward a pattern of behavior from Todd that suggested he was playing a much larger game than anyone realized. The public was already leaning heavily in her direction because, let's be honest, the composed and focused persona she's been projecting is very hard to root against. But then Todd stood up. And the way he addressed those claims wasn't with a simple denial. He didn't just say she was wrong. He suggested she was only telling the part of the story that made her look like the protagonist. He began referencing specific dates and times that didn't align with her version of events, casting a shadow of doubt over every word she had uttered just hours before. What makes this truly scandalous isn't just the words being spoken, but the history of bad reputations that both carry into this fight. Todd has been labeled by critics in the past as someone who prefers to handle issues in the shadows, a reputation that has followed him through every business deal and every public appearance. On the other hand, Porsha has had to navigate a landscape where every move she makes is scrutinized for hidden motives. When you put these two together in a legal arena, it's not just a trial, it's a character assassination on a global scale. The suspense in the courtroom was so thick you could practically taste it. Every time Todd paused to look at a document, the silence was deafening. He wasn't just defending himself. He was building a case that Porsha's entire testimony was a carefully constructed fiction designed to protect her own interests at the expense of his. He alluded to a wider network of people, producers, assistants, and mutual friends, who had all been part of a series of unresolved communication gaps. He implied that there were voices in the background, people who were whispering in Porsha's ear, guiding her toward this confrontation for reasons that have nothing to do with the truth. The intensity reached a fever pitch when the discussion shifted toward the lifestyle and the power dynamics at play. We are talking about allegations of power being used as a weapon, of influence being leveraged to silence dissent, and of a circle of people who are so insulated by their own wealth and status that they forgot the rules of the real world still apply to them. Reports from anonymous sources close to the situation have been leaking details for weeks about lavish spending and strange financial movements that seem to coincide with the rising tension between these two. There are whispers of consultation fees that don't match any known projects and travel expenses for trips that were never taken. In the world of high-level entertainment commentary, these are the red flags that usually lead to a total collapse. And yet, until today, it was all just background noise. Todd's decision to finally speak out has turned that noise into a roar. He didn't just challenge the testimony, he challenged the entire structure of the story Porsha had built. He started talking about the missing context, the parts of the emails and the texts that were conveniently left out of the evidence pile. He was essentially telling the court, and the world watching via leaked updates, that they had been sold a lie wrapped in an expensive bow. As Todd continued to dismantle the narrative, the room began to realize that the mystery caller wasn't just a minor detail in a larger story. This was the centerpiece. This was the ghost in the machine. Todd began to describe a specific interaction that happened outside the official timeline, a phone call that allegedly took place when both parties were supposed to be completely disengaged. The mere mention of this call sent a shockwave through the benches. Lawyers were leaning in, and the court reporters were typing so fast it sounded like rain on a tin roof. According to those present, this was the moment the energy shifted from legal dispute to massive exposure. Todd didn't name the caller immediately, but he described the effect of the call. He described it as the catalyst that changed everything, the moment he realized that the situation was being manipulated by someone who wasn't even in the room. This wasn't just a disagreement between two people anymore. It was an investigation into a conspiracy of silence. The build-up to this moment has been years in the making, and the fallout is expected to be even longer. We have seen these types of scandals before, where the public image of a celebrity is slowly chipped away until there is nothing left but the raw, uncomfortable truth. But this feels different. This feels like the beginning of a domino effect that could take down more than just the two people standing at the center. The mystery caller represents a whole category of people in the entertainment industry who operate in the dark, making calls and pulling strings to ensure that the correct version of events is the one the public sees. By bringing this up in court, Todd Tucker hasn't just defended his own name. He has declared war on the entire system of narrative management that has governed Atlanta's elite for decades. He was essentially telling everyone that the game was over and the lights were being turned on. The uncomfortable silence that followed his statement wasn't just because of what he said, but because of what it implied about everyone else in their social circle. If one call could be exposed, then how many others were recorded? How many other private conversations were about to become public record? This was the nuclear option, and Todd had just pressed the button. The public reaction outside the courtroom was a mirror image of the chaos inside. Within seconds of the mystery caller being mentioned, the internet began to cannibalize its own previous theories. The same people who were praising Porsha's bravery just an hour ago were now frantically searching for any clue as to who this third party could be. Names were being thrown around with reckless abandon, from former managers to current rivals, and even people within their own families. The level of speculation was reaching a point of insanity, with leaked reports appearing on every blog and social media platform, most of them contradicting each other. One supposed insider claimed that the caller was a high-level executive who had been playing both sides for years, while another suggested it was a disgruntled former employee looking for a payday. The lack of verified information only made the hunger for the truth even more ravenous. People were analyzing the body language of everyone in the courtroom, trying to find a flinch or a glance that would give away the secret. But Todd remained a statue, and Porsha remained a wall. The tension was no longer about who was right or wrong. It was about who was going to break first under the weight of the new evidence that was about to be unleashed as the proceedings moved into the second phase of this total exposure. The moment that silence took over the courtroom, it wasn't just a pause in a legal proceeding. It was the sound of an entire industry holding its breath because everyone knew that the second the seal was broken on these new records, there would be no going back. As the session transitioned into the deeper examination of the communication logs, the atmosphere shifted from tense to borderline hostile. Todd's legal team began presenting what they described as the secondary layer of evidence, a collection of metadata and timestamps that painted a completely different picture of the weeks leading up to the blowout. We are talking about a level of detail that makes your average detective novel look like a children's book. The narrative Porsha had meticulously crafted, a story of isolation and being caught off guard, started to look more like a Swiss cheese of logic. Every time a new timestamp was read aloud, it felt like another brick falling out of the wall she had built around her version of the truth. The courtroom was hit with the reality that these two were not just not talking, they were engaged in a shadow dialogue that was happening through intermediaries, encrypted apps, and yes, that infamous mystery caller who seemed to be the conductor of this entire chaotic orchestra. Insiders sitting in the front rows reported that the physical change in the room was palpable. You could see the legal aides scurrying back and forth with folders that looked heavy enough to sink a ship. The leaked reports that started hitting the internet in real time were suggesting that the mystery caller wasn't just a random contact, but a high-ranking figure whose voice carries enough weight to sink careers in a single afternoon. If these reports are even half true, we are looking at a level of corruption and narrative manipulation that goes way beyond a simple personal feud. We are talking about the potential abuse of power where phone lines were being used to coordinate stories, align testimonies, and ensure that certain inconvenient facts never saw the light of day. The sarcasm in Todd's lawyer's voice was biting as he asked if the court was expected to believe that a dozen coincidental calls at 3 a.m. were just technical glitches or wrong numbers. He was mocking the very idea of the defense's stance, and you could feel the embarrassment radiating from the other side of the. But it gets even more twisted when you look at the alleged financial trails that were hinted at during this phase. There is a reason why people say follow the money, and in this case, the money seems to be leading into a labyrinth of shell companies and creative accounting that would make a Wall Street shark blush. Rumors are swirling about a specific set of wire transfers that occurred right around the time the mystery caller made their first appearance on the logs. Was this a payoff? Was it hush money? Or was it something even more sinister, like the funding of a smear campaign designed to take Todd out of the picture before he could speak? The imaginary quotes from anonymous sources floating around the courtroom hallways were brutal. One supposed clerk was overheard saying that they had never seen a case where the evidence felt so much like a weaponized hit piece. People are talking about lavish lifestyle expenses being billed to accounts that don't technically exist, and private jets being chartered for meetings that never happened. The sheer audacity of the spending being described is enough to make any normal person's head spin. The public reaction to these revelations has been a total circus. Social media has become a digital battlefield where facts go to die and speculation is king. You have one camp of people who are absolutely convinced that Todd is a victim of a high-level frame job, while the other side is doubling down on the idea that Porsha is being gaslit by a master manipulator. The memes are already out, the hashtags are trending, and the investigative TikTokers are losing their minds trying to sync the leaked audio clips with the courtroom timeline. But the humor in the situation is dark. It's the kind of humor you find at the scene of a train wreck. People are making jokes about but dials that last for 45 minutes and lost passwords that suddenly reappear when a subpoena is issued. It's a tragedy wrapped in a comedy, served on a silver platter of celebrity ego. And then there is the question of the fallout. If these communication logs are verified as authentic, we aren't just looking at a lost court case. We are looking at a total investigative probe into the wider circle of Atlanta's power players. There are whispers of government agencies taking an interest in the unusual financial patterns mentioned in the testimony. Imagine the chaos if a federal audit was triggered by a divorce-related spat. We could be seeing resignations from board members, the collapse of production deals, and a financial crisis within certain entertainment empires that would leave hundreds of people out of work. The tension is building toward a point of no return. You can almost see the sweat on the brows of the people mentioned in those indirect messages. They thought they were safe behind their layers of assistants and lawyers, but Todd Tucker just pulled the curtain back, and the light is blinding. What's even more fascinating is the way the mystery caller has become a symbol for everything wrong with the industry. This person, whoever they are, represents the invisible hand that tries to control public perception. The fact that their identity was teased but not fully confirmed in this part of the session is a masterclass in psychological warfare. It's keeping the public hooked, keeping the pressure on Porsha, and keeping the influencers in their circle wondering if they are next on the list of exposed contacts. The reports of anonymous tipsters claiming to have the full audio of that call are driving the internet into a frenzy. Every hour, a new leaked snippet appears, usually fake, but just believable enough to keep the fire burning. We are witnessing the total democratization of a scandal, where everyone is a judge and the jury is the entire world with a Wi-Fi connection. As the second part of the session drew to a close, the judge reportedly had to call for order multiple times because the gallery was becoming too loud. The uncomfortable silence from the first part had been replaced by a low, constant murmur of disbelief. Every time Todd looked over at his legal team and gave a slight, knowing nod, it felt like another nail in the coffin of the original narrative. He wasn't just refuting claims. He was dismantling a lifestyle. He was showing the world that the perfect lives they see on screen are built on a foundation of calculated risks and hidden agendas. The fallout of this is going to be felt for years. We are talking about potential disbarments for lawyers who may have looked the other way, and the total blacklisting of anyone found to be part of the mystery caller network. The most chilling part of the entire afternoon was when the discussion moved to the future implications of the evidence. It wasn't just about what happened in the past. It was about what is going to happen next. The suggestion that there are still undisclosed communication threads yet to be presented has left everyone in a state of perpetual anxiety. If part 2 was this explosive, what on earth is left for the final act? The rumors of a new witness about to step forward are the only thing people are talking about in the hallways. Someone who was allegedly in the room when the mystery call was made. Someone who has the receipts to prove exactly who was pulling the strings. The energy in the courtroom is no longer just about a legal win. It's about survival. And as the lights dimmed for the evening recess, the last thing anyone saw was Todd Tucker looking remarkably calm, while the storm he had just unleashed continued to howl outside the courtroom doors, preparing to blow the roof off the entire case as we move into the final, most devastating phase of this exposure. As the courtroom doors swung open for the final segment of this high-stakes exposure, the air was so thick with anticipation that you could practically feel the static. This was no longer just a legal battle. It was a complete demolition of the status quo. The transition from the metadata leaks to the actual naming of names was handled with the kind of cold, calculated precision you only see from someone who has been waiting for this exact moment for years. Todd Tucker's legal team didn't just walk into that room. They marched in with the confidence of people who knew they were holding the detonator to a massive social explosion. The rumors of a new witness had already reached a fever pitch, and when a figure was finally called to the stand whose identity had been guarded like a state secret, the collective gasp from the gallery was loud enough to be heard in the street. This was the moment the mystery caller ceased to be a ghost and became a very real, very dangerous reality for everyone involved in this twisted web of Atlanta power plays. The fallout began instantly. As the witness started describing the specific nature of the communication, it became clear that the mystery caller was part of a coordinated effort to streamline a narrative that would paint Todd as the ultimate villain while shielding the true architects of this chaos. We are talking about a level of investigative findings that reveal a dark underbelly of celebrity management where truth is just a commodity to be traded. The witness described a series of meetings in undisclosed locations, places where high-profile figures thought they were safe from the prying eyes of the public. They spoke of burner phones being tossed into trash cans, encrypted messages being wiped every 24 hours, and a general atmosphere of paranoia that had gripped their entire social circle. The sarcasm in the courtroom was almost unbearable as Todd's lead attorney asked the witness to clarify if forgetting the truth was a standard requirement for being part of Porsha's inner sanctum. The mockery was pointed, and the reaction from Porsha's side was a mixture of visible distress and desperate legal maneuvering to block the most damaging testimony. But the real shocker, the thing that is going to keep the blogs running for the next decade, was the revelation of the external involvement funds. We are talking about financial records that allegedly show a massive influx of cash from third-party donors, whose interests have nothing to do with Porsha's well-being and everything to do with maintaining a specific power structure in the industry. The corruption described was so blatant it felt like a parody of a corporate scandal. There were mentions of consulting contracts for people who have never stepped foot in an office and production bonuses for shows that were cancelled years ago. The implication was clear. Someone was bankrolling this entire legal assault on Todd Tucker to ensure he stayed quiet about what he knew. The abuse of power was staggering. Insiders suggest that these funds were used to hire digital reputation managers who were tasked with flooding social media with anti-Todd sentiment, creating a fake public outcry to pressure the court. It's a level of manipulation that makes you wonder if anything we see online is actually real. Public reactions to this third phase have been nothing short of apocalyptic. The internet didn't just react, it went into a state of total meltdown. The Team Porsha supporters, who had been so vocal and so certain, were suddenly met with a wall of evidence that was impossible to ignore. The shift in tone was dramatic. People started asking, if she lied about the caller, what else is she lying about? The humor turned even darker, with memes portraying the mystery caller as a puppeteer holding the strings of the entire Atlanta elite. Pop culture references were flying left and right, comparing the situation to every major betrayal in television history. But behind the jokes was a very real sense of betrayal from the fans who had invested their emotions into what they thought was a genuine struggle for justice. They realized they were just pawns in a much larger game of chess, and they weren't happy about it. The legal consequences of today's session are going to be catastrophic for those involved. We aren't just talking about a lost case. We are talking about a potential domino effect of government investigations. When you start talking about suspicious wire transfers and coordinated smear campaigns involving undisclosed financial backers, the authorities don't just sit back and watch. There are already whispers of a multi-agency probe into the financial irregularities of several production companies linked to this circle. We could be looking at a wave of hypothetical resignations as board members scramble to distance themselves from the radioactive fallout of this testimony. The anticipated financial crisis for certain influencers is no longer a theory, it's a looming reality. Brands are already reportedly pausing their contracts, waiting to see who is left standing when the smoke finally clears. The tension in the industry is at an all-time high, with everyone wondering whose name is on the next list of leaked communication logs. As the testimony reached its climax, Todd Tucker himself seemed to undergo a transformation. He wasn't just a defendant anymore. He was the one holding the mirror up to the entire room. His final statement, delivered with a calm that was more terrifying than any outburst, addressed the idea of missing context one last time. He essentially told the court that this wasn't just about him and Porsha. It was about the system that allowed this kind of deception to flourish. He hinted that the mystery caller was just the tip of the iceberg and that there are other records, other witnesses, and other hidden truths that are yet to be exposed. The anticipation for the next phase of this trial is so high that it has effectively shut down any other entertainment news. Nothing else matters right now except the total exposure of this conspiracy of silence. The atmosphere at the end of the session was one of exhausted shock. Even the most cynical observers were left speechless by the sheer volume of information that had been unleashed. The uncomfortable silence of the morning had turned into a stunned paralysis by the evening. People were walking out of the courtroom with their heads down, as if they were afraid that merely being in the room made th. The mystery caller has been exposed, but in their place, 1,000 more questions have been raised. Who else was on those calls? Who authorized the payments? And most importantly, how deep does this rot actually go? This was the nuclear option that Todd Tucker promised, and the fallout is going to cover the entire industry for years to come. What we saw today was the death of a narrative and the birth of a new, much darker reality. The investigation is no longer just about a personal disagreement. It's a full-scale probe into the ethics of the entertainment world's power players. The fallout will include probes, financial audits, and the total destruction of reputations that were thought to be untouchable. Todd Tucker has changed the direction of this case, and in doing so, he may have changed the industry forever. The questions being raised now don't have easy answers, and the people who thought they could control the truth are now finding out that the truth is the one thing they can't buy. As we prepare for the final call to action, one thing is certain. The world is watching, and for the first time, they are seeing everything. This entire saga has been a masterclass in how to dismantle a lie, but it has also been a sobering reminder of how much effort it takes to hide the truth in a world built on image. The mystery caller might have been exposed, but the shadows they operated in are still there, waiting for the next scandal to break. The energy in the courtroom as the judge finally banged the gavel for the day was one of definitive change. The game has been upended, the players have been exposed, and the audience is finally seeing the man behind the curtain. If you thought the first two parts of this script were intense, this final exposure has set a new standard for courtroom drama. The question is no longer who is right, but who will survive the coming storm. The fallout is just beginning, and the consequences will be felt far beyond the walls of that courtroom. We are looking at a total shift in how celebrity conflicts are handled, with receipts becoming the only currency that matters. Todd Tucker has proven that silence isn't just golden, it's a weapon. And today, he used it to devastating effect. As we move into the final conclusion of this unprecedented legal battle, the only thing left to do is wait for the next domino to fall, because if there is one thing we have learned today, it's that in the world of high-stakes entertainment, the truth is never as simple as it looks. And there you have it, the absolute, unfiltered collapse of a narrative that was supposed to be bulletproof. We just watched the mystery caller get dragged into the light, and honestly, the entertainment world is never going to be the same. But the real question isn't just about what happened in that courtroom. It's about what you think is coming next. Is Todd Tucker the hero of this story for finally exposing the truth, or is he just another player who knew exactly when to strike? And what about Porsha Williams? Is this the end of her empire, or does she have one last move that we haven't seen yet? The silence has been broken, but the noise is just getting started. I want to see your theories in the comments, don't hold back. Who do you think that caller really was, and who else is shaking in their boots right now? This is the kind of truth they don't want you to see, so make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because this investigation is far from over. The next update could drop at any second, and you do not want to be the last one to know the real story. Stay tuned, because the truth is finally coming out, and it's crazier than anything we could have imagined.